Have you ever agreed to something you absolutely did not want to do, and then spent the next few hours feeling angry, exhausted, or disappointed in yourself? Maybe someone asked for a favor when you were already overwhelmed. Maybe you answered yes to avoid conflict. Maybe you smiled while saying yes, but inside, something in you quietly said no. And the strange part is this: you knew it was hurting you. You knew you didn't have the energy. You knew you were sacrificing your own peace. But you still couldn't say no. If that sounds familiar, you're not weak. You're not broken. And you're definitely not alone. Because the inability to say no usually has very little to do with kindness. And almost everything to do with fear. Fear of disappointing people. Fear of being rejected. Fear of conflict. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of losing love, approval, connection, or importance. And what makes this even more dangerous is that many people don't realize they're trapped in this pattern until they feel emotionally exhausted all the time. The scary thing about people-pleasing is that it often looks like kindness from the outside. But inside, it can feel like slow emotional self-abandonment. Most people who struggle to say no are deeply empathetic. They care about others. They want harmony. They want to help. They don't want to hurt anyone. But somewhere along the way, they unconsciously learned a painful lesson: my value depends on keeping other people happy. That belief changes everything. Because once your self-worth becomes connected to approval, saying no stops feeling like a simple decision. It starts feeling dangerous. For some people, this began in childhood. Maybe love in your home felt conditional. Maybe being good meant being obedient, helpful, quiet, easy, or emotionally convenient. Maybe conflict in your family felt unsafe. Maybe disappointing a parent brought guilt, tension, silence, or emotional distance. So your nervous system adapted. You learned to read people carefully. You learned to avoid upsetting others. You learn to prioritize everyone else's emotional comfort before your own needs. And over time, that adaptation became your personality. You became the nice one. The reliable one. The understanding one. The easygoing one. But underneath those labels, many people are carrying exhaustion they never talk about. Because constantly saying yes creates a strange emotional contradiction. You help everyone. Yet secretly feel unseen. You're available for everyone. Yet emotionally unavailable to yourself. You become needed by many people, while feeling deeply disconnected from your own needs. And eventually, resentment starts growing quietly in the background. Not because you're selfish, but because human beings are not designed to endlessly betray themselves. This is something many people don't realize: every unnecessary yes contains a hidden no. When you say yes to something you don't want, you often say no to your energy. No to your peace. No to your rest. No to your priorities. No to your mental health. No to your boundaries. No to yourself. And after years of this, many people begin feeling emotionally numb, irritable, anxious, or strangely disconnected from life. Not because they're lazy. Not because they lack discipline. But because they are emotionally overextended. There's also another hidden reason why saying no feels difficult. Many people unconsciously confuse boundaries with rejection. They think, if I say no, people will think I don't care. If I set limits, I'll seem rude. If I disappoint someone, they might stop loving me. But healthy boundaries are not rejection. They are clarity. And ironically, people who never set boundaries often end up feeling more emotionally disconnected in relationships. Because when you constantly suppress your real feelings to maintain peace, your relationships slowly become performances instead of genuine connections. People begin interacting with the version of you that always says yes. Not the real you. And that creates loneliness. One of the deepest forms of loneliness is being loved for who you pretend to be. Think about that for a second. If people only know the agreeable version of you, the endlessly available version, the emotionally accommodating version, then a part of you may secretly wonder, would they still value me if I stopped giving so much? That fear keeps many people trapped. And social conditioning makes it even stronger. From a young age, many people are taught that self-sacrifice equals goodness. Especially empathetic people. Especially caregivers. Especially parents. Especially women in many cultures. You hear messages like, be nice. Don't be difficult. Think about others. Keep the peace. Don't make things awkward. Very few people are taught, you are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to disappoint people. You are allowed to say no without explaining yourself. So people grow up believing boundaries require permission. But emotionally healthy people understand something important: a boundary is not an attack. It's information. It simply tells others where your emotional limits are. And the truth is, people who genuinely respect you will usually respect your boundaries too. The people who become angry when you say no are often the people who benefited most from your lack of boundaries. That realization changes everything. Because sometimes the guilt you feel after saying no is not proof you did something wrong. Sometimes it's proof you're breaking an unhealthy pattern. And breaking patterns feels uncomfortable. Imagine someone who spent 20 years automatically saying yes. The first time they set a boundary, their nervous system may react with anxiety. Their brain interprets the discomfort as danger. But discomfort is not always danger. Sometimes discomfort is growth. This is why learning to say no can feel emotionally confusing at first. You may feel guilty. You may over-explain. You may replay conversations in your mind for hours. You may worry people are upset with you. But over time, something incredible starts happening. You begin trusting yourself again. And that trust changes your entire emotional world. Because people who cannot say no often lose connection with their inner voice. They become so focused on managing other people's emotions that they stop asking themselves simple questions like, what do I actually want? What do I actually feel? What do I need right now? Their attention is always outward. But emotional health requires an inward connection too. One psychological pattern connected to this is called emotional approval dependency. This happens when your emotional state becomes heavily influenced by whether other people approve of you. If people are happy with you, you feel calm. If someone is disappointed, you feel anxious. If someone is upset, you feel responsible. Over time, this creates emotional hypervigilance. You start monitoring people constantly. Their tone. Their mood. Their reactions. Their silence. Their facial expressions. You become emotionally exhausted trying to prevent discomfort before it even happens. But here's the painful truth: no matter how kind, careful, giving, or accommodating you are, you will still disappoint people sometimes. That's unavoidable. Because mature relationships are not built on constant agreement. They're built on honesty. And honesty sometimes includes limits. Some of the healthiest people in the world say no regularly. Not because they lack compassion, but because they understand sustainability. They know that saying yes to everything eventually destroys emotional balance. Think about people you truly admire emotionally. People who seem calm, grounded, confident, and peaceful. Most of them probably have boundaries. Not cruel boundaries. Not aggressive boundaries. Clear boundaries. They know when to rest. They know when to step away. They know when something is too much. They know they cannot save everyone. And most importantly, they do not measure their worth by how available they are. That's a huge shift. Because many people secretly believe, if I'm useful, I'm valuable. So they become addicted to being needed. Helping others gives them identity. Being available gives them purpose. Being dependable gives them emotional validation. But eventually, they burn out. And burnout is not always caused by doing too much. Sometimes it's caused by ignoring yourself for too long. There's also a hidden emotional reward in always saying yes. It temporarily protects you from rejection. If you constantly accommodate people, you reduce the chances of criticism, conflict, or abandonment. Your brain learns, keeping others happy keeps me emotionally safe. But this safety comes at a cost. Because you slowly lose authenticity. And without authenticity, confidence becomes impossible. Real confidence is not forcing people to like you. It's being okay even if some people don't. That changes the way you move through life. You stop trying to earn your right to exist through endless usefulness. You stop overperforming emotionally. You stop carrying responsibility for everyone else's feelings. And something surprising happens. Your relationships often improve. Because healthy people usually trust honest boundaries more than fake agreement. Imagine asking someone for a favor and they say yes resentfully. You can feel it. The energy changes. Now imagine someone respectfully says, "I can't do that right now." There's honesty in that. Clarity. Authenticity. And authenticity creates emotional safety far more than forced niceness ever could. Another reason people struggle to say no is because they fear being perceived as selfish. But selfishness and self-respect are not the same thing. Selfishness ignores other people completely. Self-respect includes yourself too. That difference matters. A person with healthy boundaries can still be generous. Still loving. Still compassionate. Still supportive. The difference is they don't destroy themselves in the process. And honestly, many people don't realize how deeply exhausted they are until they finally stop overgiving. Sometimes people spend years running on emotional survival mode. Always available. Always helping. Always fixing. Always listening. Always sacrificing. Then one day they suddenly feel emotionally empty and wonder, what happened to me? What happened is simple. They abandon themselves gradually. One yes at a time. And the body keeps score of that. Chronic stress. Mental fatigue. Irritability. Anxiety. Difficulty sleeping. Emotional numbness. Loss of motivation. Sometimes the issue is not productivity. It's emotional depletion. This is why boundaries are not just psychological. They're physical too. Your nervous system needs recovery. Your brain needs rest. Your emotions need space. Without boundaries, your internal world never gets silence. And silence is necessary for clarity. Have you ever noticed that when you finally spend time alone without pressure, something inside you begins speaking again? You suddenly realize what's been bothering you. What you actually feel. What you actually want. That inner voice was always there. It was just buried underneath obligation. One of the most powerful moments in emotional growth happens when a person realizes, I am allowed to disappoint people and still be a good person. That sentence changes lives. Because many people unconsciously believe love must be earned through constant emotional labor. But real love does not require permanent self-erasure. In fact, the healthiest relationships allow space for honesty. Space for limits. Space for individuality. Space for rest. Space for disagreement. And something important happens when you begin saying no more often. At first, some people may resist it. Especially if they benefited from your constant availability. They may call you distant. Different. Difficult. Selfish. But eventually, one of two things happens. Healthy relationships adapt. Unhealthy relationships reveal themselves. Both outcomes are valuable. Because boundaries don't just protect your peace. They reveal relationship dynamics clearly. And clarity is powerful. Another difficult truth is this: many people are more afraid of temporary guilt than permanent exhaustion. So they choose exhaustion repeatedly. They say yes to avoid one uncomfortable moment. Then carry stress for days afterward. But emotionally mature people understand something deeper: short-term discomfort often creates long-term peace. And long-term peace is worth protecting. Learning to say no is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming honest. It's about realizing your time is limited. Your energy is limited. Your emotional capacity is limited. And if you give all of it away carelessly, eventually there will be nothing left for your own life. This is why boundaries are deeply connected to self-worth. The moment you believe your needs matter too, your decisions begin changing. You stop apologizing for resting. You stop explaining every boundary excessively. You stop treating your emotional exhaustion like a personal failure. And slowly, your nervous system relaxes. You no longer feel responsible for fixing every situation. You no longer panic when someone is disappointed. You no longer interpret conflict as catastrophe. You begin understanding something most emotionally healthy people learn eventually: other people's emotions are not always your responsibility. That realization creates freedom. And freedom changes your energy. You become calmer, clearer, more intentional, less reactive, less resentful. Because resentment often comes from saying yes when your soul wanted to say no. That's why people sometimes feel strangely emotional the first time they finally set a boundary. They are not just changing behavior. They are reclaiming themselves. And maybe that's what this is really about. Not learning how to say no mechanically, but learning how to stop abandoning yourself emotionally. Because every time you ignore your limits to maintain approval, you send yourself a painful message: my needs matter less. But every healthy boundary sends a different message: I matter too. That sentence may sound simple, but for many people, it feels revolutionary. Especially those who spent years believing their worth depended on how much they could carry for everyone else. The truth is, your kindness becomes more meaningful when it is chosen freely instead of driven by fear. A yes means more when you know how to say no. And maybe the goal is not becoming less caring. Maybe the goal is finally caring about yourself too. Because your energy matters. Your peace matters. Your emotional health matters. And protecting those things does not make you selfish. It makes you emotionally responsible. So the next time you feel guilty for setting a boundary, pause for a second. Ask yourself, am I protecting my peace? Or am I protecting other people from temporary discomfort? That question reveals a lot. Because sometimes the hardest no is not the one you say to others. It's the one you say to the old version of yourself that believed exhaustion was the price of love. And maybe your life begins changing the moment you realize it never was. If this helped you understand your mind better, subscribe for more videos like this.